Hello everyone, I am Demented Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of The Brewery, I will be discussing a new commander from the soon-to-be-released Commander 2019 Marisi Breaker of the Coil. Marisi is a legendary cat warrior that costs 1 generic, 1 red, 1 green, and 1 white. It's a 5/4 with no keywords, but at least it passes the vanilla test. That being said, it does have 2 interesting abilities. One of them disallows opponents from casting spells during combat. That's not the ability I'm going to be taking advantage of though. The ability that interests me is its second one. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you goad every creature they control. That's crazy. Just one creature getting through forces opponents to attack each other. Therefore, the main strategy of the deck is to get opponents to kill each other with their creatures. However, in order for that to happen, you have to get damage through, and Marisi has to be alive long enough for it to happen. Luckily, it's a delayed trigger, so even if an opponent removes Marisi from the board, its effect still occurs until the beginning of your next turn. Since all we need is one creature to get through, I've added as many creatures as possible that could secure that combat damage. In other words, creatures with Shadow, Horsemanship, and Landwalk. So I included Augur Ilvek, Zealot Ilvek, Spirit Endal, Soltari Foot Soldier, Soltari Champion, Soltari Crusader, Soltari Guerrillas, Soltari Lancer, Soltari Monk, Soltari Priest, Soltari Trooper, and Soltari Visionary. The deck might seem like a Soltari tribal, but it's because we're fortunate enough to have so many white creatures with Shadow. It is worth mentioning though that most of those creatures do other things besides just having Shadow. For example, Soltari Champion pumps all your attacking creatures +1/+1. Soltari Crusader can pump itself +1/+0 by paying 1 on a white. Soltari Guerrillas can ping creatures for 3 damage without paying anything. Soltari Visionary can destroy a player's enchantment when it deals combat damage to them. And Spirit Endal can give Shadow to one of your creatures with its forecast ability at the beginning of your upkeep, or at least during your upkeep anyways. As for the other unblockable creatures, Dryad Sophisticate has non-basic Landwalk, which is completely relevant in Commander games, while Shu Cavalry and Yellow Scarves Cavalry have Horsemanship. There are many other creatures in this color identity that have Horsemanship, but their casting cost was too high for what I wanted to do. The deck wants to get these weenies out there quickly in order to goad your opponent's creatures when Marisi has hit the field. Now that we've goaded their creatures, it'll be a slow game if your opponents don't have enough things to attack each other with. That's why this deck will give your opponents plenty of presence in the form of creature tokens. Hunted Dragon, Hunted Lamasu, and Hunted Troll each give an opponent tokens when they enter the battlefield, while providing you with a much better beater than they have. Beast Within, Generous Gift, Rampage of the Clans, and Terastodon destroy things while also giving your opponents attackers at the same time. Sylvan Offering and Alliance of Arms gives a ton of creature tokens to your opponents in order for them to attack each other with. Genesis Chamber gives any player a 1/1 mirror token whenever a non-token creature enters their battlefield. Tapping Forbidden Orchard for mana is another great way to give an opponent a 1/1 creature token. Casting Elephant Resurgence after a couple of rounds of combat, and your opponents are bound to get a huge elephant token due to all their creatures in the graveyard. Varchild Betrayal of Geldor and Varchild's War Riders also give opponents a massive amount of creature tokens in the form of 1/1 survivors. What's great about these is that with Varchild in play, survivors can attack you. Survivors also can't block. On top of that, if Varchild leaves the battlefield, you get to take all those survivors under your control. This includes any changelings they may have as well. Another way of giving opponents a creature each turn is Tahngarth First Mate. If it's a situation where Tahngarth will survive that combat, just hand him over to an opponent if they attack in order to give them yet another attacker, and a 5/5 at that. Rite of the Raging Storm and Goblin Spymaster each give opponents a token during each of their turns. The elementals from the enchantment can't attack you, and the token from the Spymaster is amazing in and of itself, since it forces opponents to attack with all their creatures. This is great in case you don't have Marisi on the battlefield, but still want your opponents to attack. I'm still a little bummed that the Goblin Spy Master is a Goblin Rogue and not a Goblin Spy, but what can you do? Another way to goad opponents in case Marisi isn't around is Grenzo Havoc Raiser. Not only is this creature good for goading at least one creature an opponent controls, but if you don't want to goad the creature, you can also try and play cards from the top of their library. On the topic of not having Marisi on the field, what if your opponents want to attack but are eventually able to attack us? We are giving them tons of creatures after all. Well, we got a nice pillow fort for their troubles. Norn's Annex, Archangel of Tides, Baird, Steward of Argive, Windborn Muse, Sphere of Safety, and Ghostly Prison. These permanents tax your opponents if they were want to attack you. You can also just deny them the attack outright thanks to Blazing Archon. Even then, if the situation is too heinous to deal with, wipe the board away with Planner Cleansing and Hour of Revelation. One thing to note is that if your opponents are being forced to attack each other, they're going to wind up defenseless, unless of course their creatures have Vigilance or Summoning Sickness. One way around that is giving haste to everything with Concordant Crossroads and Mass Hysteria. However, be wary of wily opponents though. They can bypass your tricks by attacking first and then casting important creatures later. Since they've already attacked, they wouldn't have to attack with any creatures they cast in their post-combat main phase. That's still not an issue though, because they're still probably going to be using those creatures to block with anyways. Now, with opponents' creatures being goaded during each of your turns, they won't ever be attacking you. Therefore, games are going to be pretty quick since you can attack the table with complete abandon and total disregard. Even so, in order to speed things up even quicker, cards like Gisela Blade of Gold Knight, Bitter Feud, Dictate of the Twin Gods, and Furnace of Wrath double the damage being dealt around the table. Another way to take advantage of all your unblockable weenies attacking is with Orin Frost Fang. This will help you dig deep into the deck with all the cards you'll be drawing off of it. This is key since it's important to be able to protect your commander and your board state. So you're going to want to draw into the deck in order to find those protective cards. It's not as important to protect Muricy since its ability has a delayed trigger, but having to cast it multiple times in a game can be a bit of a nuisance. Since protecting him isn't that paramount, including Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots should be enough, since they can at least protect against targeted removal or other targeted effects. Other ways to protect your board state are cards like Heroic Intervention, Boros Charm, and Teferi's Protection. Giving all of your permanents indestructible is great against all board wipes that don't reduce toughness. And even if they do, that's what Teferi's Protection is for. It's also great against an overloaded Cyclonic Rift, which is probably why it's so expensive. If you're facing opponents that are heavier on non-creature cards, like artifacts and enchantments, you can take care of those problems with Aura Shards. This helps you against control and other Pillow Fort type decks. In order to maintain the high speeds at which you want the game to go, you're going to need to ramp. So spells like Kodama's Reach, Cultivate, Farseek, 3 Visits, and Nature's Lure are a must. The first 2 can find you a basic to put in your hand and a basic into play tapped, while the latter 3 can ramp any forest directly into play, meaning lands with dual typing. It's also crucial to run mana rocks like Sol Ring and Mana Crypt. Fortunately, you don't need to run so many Moxen in this deck since most of the creatures are weenies. That being said, Sol Ring and Mana Crypt are still good for fast turns. I found that these 5 ramp spells and 2 mana rocks have worked just fine since you only need to attack an opponent with a single unblockable creature in order to goad all of their creatures. While on the topic of speed and efficient mana, as always, I try to build my decks without any lands that enter the battlefield tapped. So I'm running all 10 fetches, all 3 dual lands, all 3 shock lands, all 5 pain lands, both horizon lands, Ancient Tomb, Temple of the False God, Bountiful Promenade, Spire Garden, Command Tower, Exotic Orchard, Reflecting Pool, Rith's Grove, and 2 of every snow basic, just in case opponents are running anything that benefit me for it. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Marisi, Breaker of the Coil. This is definitely a fun commander to build around with the potential of creating some mayhem at the table. You could easily get a couple of games in thanks to how quick this commander can make them. You can find my current deck list for this commander down in the description. Thanks for watching this episode of the Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am Demented Kirby, and happy brewing.